Hello and happy Sunday. Welcome back to Witches of the Moon. I'm Eva Maria, your Sunday co-host. And this week we've been covering magical mishaps. This is a really fun subject. Obviously I, like pretty much every practitioner out there, has had their moments of, oops, little mistakes happen, mishaps. Nobody's perfect. Everybody does things that don't always turn out the way you hope that they would. And I can think of three right off the top of my head that are pretty funny, or I find them funny anyway. Maybe they're not the funniest, but I find them funny. The first one that I really remember, especially from my early days, I was a young teenager and I was having trouble in school with some girl. And I decided I'm going to cast on this girl, so I at the time I didn't understand the concept of a witch bottle, the traditional kind anyway. So, I prepared the witch bottle, I put like the sharp implements in there in the traditional way, and I peed in it and I did all this stuff. But I put the girl's picture in there. Now, and then I buried it, of course. But oddly enough, it didn't protect me, and I didn't quite understand why. So I asked someone who was older than me, who I knew, and who knew more about the occult and the metaphysical and all that kind of stuff. This person was sort of like a mentor to me, and I was like, well, what happened? Why didn't it work? And he told me, he goes, wait a minute, you put her picture in there? He's like, you know what you did? You made the witch bottle for her. So it was funny, here I was, this angry kid, and instead of, doing what I had thought I was going to do, I actually did something that was pretty harmless, and the result was kind of funny. It was kind of like, that's what you get, But, obviously, as we learn and grow and as practitioners, through the years, we learn from our mistakes. Obviously, I came to understand better the concept of a witch bottle being more of a protective thing. Albeit it is, in a way, a little bit of an offensive sort of protective measure, being that it has all those sharp objects inside. But, I did come to understand the concept a little better. It is not so much an attacking device as a protecting, means to an end. And then I have two other incidents to share with you that are actually a little more recent. One of them happened, the earlier of the two, happened, I want to say maybe sometime in the summer, this past summer, I believe it was, or it might have been the spring. I had mixed up a powder with several other powders, and I put it in my pocket and I went to work. And it had a lot of different, components to this powder, and it was basically, sort of to help me out, things like Hi John and like money draw, like all sorts of, And so I had mixed up this mixture and I put it in my pocket and I went to work, and things were pretty much the way they should have been, except at one point in the day, I found myself wishing really, really, really bad to go home. Suddenly, the power goes out. And I'm like, what? It turns out the power didn't just go out at my job. The power went out on the entire side of the highway that my job was on. The backup generator that worked for like maybe 15 minutes, that thing blew too. Everything was completely pitch black. So obviously we couldn't, they sent me home early. I got to go home early. But it's, the moral of the story is like, be careful what you wish for, and be careful when you kind of mix things, because all these separate powders that I used, in themselves, they were pretty empowering and they were pretty beneficial, but when they came together, they did something entirely unexpected. They kind of had like an oomph, you know, they packed a punch. So that was kind of a funny story. And I ended up saving my recipe and I labeled it, you know, what was it? Power of Success powder or something like that. I have to look it up again. I have it in one of my witch's notebooks somewhere laying around, and I still have a little bit left of the mixture. But oh my God, it was just really funny. And then my most recent mishap, I made a video on my channel called "Oops, Know What You Are Evoking," and that one was a little silly too. Kind of a really silly mistake that I really should have known better. But coming back to our topic at hand, I think the main thing to realize is that we all make mistakes, number one. And number two, you can really learn from your mistakes. But I think certain mistakes can be more frightening or more dangerous than others depending on what exactly takes place. Like my mistakes that I have outlined here, I mean, I've made others, but these are just ones that like really stuck out in my mind. The ones I've outlined for you here were more kind of funny than like, oh my God, nobody dropped dead, thank God, knock wood. Nothing like tragic came about, but sometimes things can really go south really bad to the point where you're like, oh my God. So I recommend, as I always do, try to think through what you plan to do as best as you can. If you're able to do some sort of a divination before you cast your spell, as you're planning it out in your witch's notebook, I definitely recommend that. But again, keep in mind, trial and error is how you grow. So it's good anyway to keep a record of what you do in your witch's notebook, which is kind of like a work in progress. It's just kind of like you keep track of the sorts of things that you're doing, so that later in hindsight you can go back and go, well, that didn't work out very well, and now looking at what I did written down on paper, here and here and here is where I would change this. Maybe this would make it better, or maybe you tweak it. You kind of work on that until you finally get that working right, so that if you wanted to keep, let's say, a final book of shadows where, your best work is, you could take that eventually and put that in there. But, again, it's trial and error is something that you shouldn't necessarily be afraid of. I'm not really afraid of it as a KO, as a chaos magician. I understand that, hey, it happens. You do the best that you can, and you try to, use your magic responsibly in the sense of, whatever you do, you have to be willing to accept the responsibility for what you've done. And if you're going to go stirring the pot, you should know what to do should something bad, unforeseen come out of that. How would you, I mean, okay, if something unforeseen happens, you're probably not going to expect that one particular thing will happen, but you should be, I think, in a place on your in your magical experience that should something go wrong, you are well equipped to do something to address it. If you're very, very, very fresh, try not to delve into anything that's really super crazy over your head, something that freaks you out, because again, psychological triggers, they can twist stuff up, and nothing too crazy complex to the point where you're like, oh my God, what do I do? You should have some, start small, work your way up is what I'm trying to say. But yeah, basically I'm gonna link the video I mentioned, the most recent story that happened to me, the Oops, Know What You Are Evoking. I'm going to link that in the description of this video, just, if you want to check it out and kind of giggle a little bit. But yeah, mishaps happen. They happen. Just learn from them, and again, use forethought. Consult divination, know your correspondences, know your associations and your symbolism. Know your mind, know your feelings. If something doesn't feel right, you probably shouldn't do it. That feeling that you get inside, those instincts, you should really always listen to those, because I mean, I know that I've learned in my life that when I don't listen to feelings about things, like when I have a feeling like, oh, I shouldn't really do that, and then I go against that feeling, something bad happens. So try to, yeah, listen to your instincts, consult divination, maybe plan things out. A witch's notebook would be a really good idea. I hope this video has been helpful to you, and I hope it's made you giggle a little bit with my stories, and I hope you enjoy, if you do decide to check out my Oops, Know What You Are Evoking video. I hope that one makes you giggle a little bit too. But I hope, in the very least, that I've, express to you my main points, and that is, hey, things are going to happen because nobody's perfect. Nobody's perfect. You're going to have mistakes. I've had mistakes. Everybody's had mistakes. Nobody has all the answers. Things just happen. But it's how you grow. So look at it that way. Learn from your mistakes, okay? And until our next exchange, blessed be and ashe. Have a great Sunday.